Welcome along, and we continue with this army analysis series. This is the second video in the High Middle Ages period, and we are on this rather wonderfully strange army, the Tuareg 950 AD army, which is a desert nomad army. And I have played against this army in the league, and it is quite tough to play against, and we'll go into some of the reasons why that could be. I've set it to 1200 points. That's what we use at the moment in the digital league. In this section, some sections are 1600 points like classical, but High Middle Ages, it seems to work really well at 1200, so that's what I've used here. Now, let's talk about the obvious straight away. I mean, look how many camels you can bring, these camel lancers. Up to 18 if you really wanted to, but I've tried to balance it out with some infantry and also max my skirmishers, but I've still got 12. And they are awesome. They're one of my favorite units in the game, and they must be one of the most cost effective. 46. I mean, they are so difficult to play against, and in most armies you're only playing against one or two or three, you know, not that many. It's mostly cav in most armies and lancer units, but when you've got so many, it's an absolute nightmare. It really is. For example, I just did some tests and looked at how they do against city knights, which are knightly lancers. They cost 60, and they're almost on a par with them on impact and melee. It's just slightly disadvantaged. And why is that? Well, because the knights might get a plus 100 POA advantage because they're knightly lancers and they've got better armor. But you've got to take into account the disordering factor, and the disordering factor is pretty huge. When you open up your combat log and you look at how it's all worked out, it's roughly about a plus 70 POA, that disordering factor alone, because it works out at 22% on the combat log to their advantage. So it's roughly around 70 POA advantage against cavalry, which is huge. So that means that even up against knightly lancers, the city lancers at 60, they only cost 46. They're more than a match, and they can hold or even beat them. So against cavalry, and that's city knights. What about against just your regular lancers and so on? It's going to be even worse. So they are deadly against cav, and even against infantry. Okay, your defensive spearmen, they're not going to do great against them, but what they do, because they're lancers, they keep bouncing all the time. So when you're in a battle against them, they charge in. If they lose, they just bounce. And there might be situations in a battle where you've just got to charge in. You just got to unlock some zone of control, or just get them out the way, or whatever it might be, protect a flank, etc. And a standard infantry unit like defensive spearmen are greatly disadvantaged if they charge into these guys. So there's not a lot of choice. You've just got to sort of stand there and hope for the best. And I've taken 13 infantry units, which is a fair size. I mean, roughly, a lot of armies will have maybe around 18 infantry units. So if you've got 13, even though they're not the best of the best, that's a fair size. And then, you know, with some camel lancers in support, just to, you know, give you a decent line, main line, you're still going to have loads of lancers left over. They are really tricky. This army is really tricky to play against. Really tricky. And even this infantry, yes, it might be medium foot, but it's impact foot. So that's another nightmare, because they've got a chance to disrupt on impact. So even though there's not a lot to this army, only 5 different kinds of units, the combinations you get, the amount of camel lancers you can field, you can you know, wipe out the enemy cavalry. I mean, I just did my first video I did for this period was the papal list, the 1050 list, with Norman allies, and you know, I only had 4 cav. So, you know, how are you going to stop all of these camels coming around, or just locking you down, and then, you know, the infantry coming in to support? It's tough. It's tough. Okay, you don't get so many skirmishers. That's a kind of a weakness, because, you know, whether it's papal list or other European armies, they're probably going to have quite a lot of crossbowmen, skirmishers, archers. So that's, you know, a plus against mounted in general. So, you know, you could fire away at some of these camel lancers. But again, I remember when I was playing this army, I only had 6 crossbowmen, and I didn't have that many skirmishers. So if you've got 12 camel lancers and 2 Muslim lancers, that's just a lot of mounted troops to try to disorder or disrupt. Maybe if you were playing against this army, you'd have to take extra skirmishers and just try and take as many archers as you can, because as the infantry is not the greatest, you wouldn't need. So as an example, with that papal list that I just talked about in the last video, I had 3 of the dismounted lancers. Now, fighting against this kind of army, you know, what is that? That's almost, is about 207. It's about 207 points for 3 units. That's a bit of a waste, because you don't need such great units against these infantry. You've got 4 irregular foot, and then you've got your standard impact medium foot. So maybe with an army, if I had the papal army, I would just take maybe 1 or 2 of the dismounted knights, and then I just take a load of defensive spear and a raw spear, and some extra skirmishers. The records, when I looked at the records for armies in the league from 1 to 11, so we just finished season 11. We've got 12 just around the corner, starting up. It was 15 wins and 21 losses and no draws. So, yeah, it's a fairly standard record. As I've said before, most armies, when you look at their record, they're evens or even below evens. There's not that many armies that actually have a winning record. So it's okay. It's okay. I do think you probably have to be a fairly skillful player or creative player or aggressive player to play with this kind of army, because you can't really, you haven't got any crossbowmen, you haven't got that many skirmishers, your infantry's not the greatest, so you can't really sort of sit back or just play the percentages. You've got to really get these camels going and get flank attacks, destroy the enemy cavalry, and then get around the back or just cause havoc, really. So you're going to have to be quite aggressive to play with this army, because, as I've said, mounted in general is quite susceptible to missile fire, so you can't hang around. You've got to get in. What would I give this army? Maybe a B, about a B. I need to play with it. I'm going to maybe challenge a few people, and I might set up a game and see how they go. You do wonder, with impact foot, it's always the roll of the dice. I mean, if you don't get good impact, and you're up against heavy infantry, even your standard defensive spear, but with some of this, it's armored spearmen, better quality troops. These infantry units are not going to last so long. But just with the amount of mounted troops you can field, you can maybe, kind of maybe try and get your mounted around on the flanks, and then keep them a little bit in reserve. And then once your camels are in action, you go in maybe to support. Use the rough ground. There's, in a lot of these maps, there's quite a fair bit of rough ground. So with your irregulars, try and get that ground. And even, this is medium foot, so you've got to use the terrain as much as possible. You've got hills. Try and get a height advantage. Anything you can do really to maximize your chances. You're going to have to make the most of the map and the terrain for your infantry. As I've said, there's not so much choice. I mean, if you wanted a few less skirmishers, you could, if you took out a lancer unit, then you could take another camel lancer, and you could go up to 10 maybe with your medium foot. So when there's only five options, there's not a lot of choice. Okay, that's about it. So leave comments below. Maybe you've played against this army. Maybe you've played with this army. What do you think about it? What's your experience? Let us all know. And good luck to all of you who are about to play in Season 12. I'm going to continue with these videos, and I'm going to try and do a good few more before the season starts, and then maybe that will just help some of you in the league thinking about, if you've got this army, oh yes, maybe this could work, or when I'm fighting this particular kind of army, maybe something else would work, or when you're fighting against these guys, maybe it will help you with your setup. Because I think someone mentioned this on the forum, that a large part of the game is about what you do before the battle begins. It is in the setup. Quite often, you set up and you go and play, and there's just, your chances of winning are really low, and it's just because maybe you just rushed your selection, or you didn't look at the map, or you didn't really consider how many camel lancers you were going to be fighting, and so on. So maybe this kind of video series can help people get some ideas and help them in their unit selection and setup for games. Okay, that's about it. Thanks for watching and see you again soon.